I am preparing to make my ginger warming muscle pain reliever. I have my quart mason jar here, and I'm pouring in 1 cup of carrier oil. Almond, olive, or coconut oil are recommended. They're really the best from personal experience and what others who have made this have told me, and some that I've tried that I have not made. I chose olive oil this time. Almond oil is a little bit pricier and more difficult to find in our rural area. I use it for a whole lot of things, including my hair every day. And coconut oil, I think we buy it by the vat at this point. We use it for so much. But the time of year that it is, it would be difficult to keep it into a salve form if I was just doing a massage oil and not adding in the beeswax pastilles that you see here to make it more of a salve that kind of sinks in the skin better, I think, and will stay on longer than the oil. Oil can sink into the skin quickly, but then it runs off. I like something that can kind of coat really well when I'm doing something to relieve a sore muscle. Particularly my husband's back is what this batch is going to be used for. And it's summer right now, and it is so very, very hot that I'm afraid if I use coconut oil, because it fluctuates from a solid to a liquid so quickly, even with the beeswax, I might end up with some globby mess that's in between a salve and an oil. So I have my carrier oil in there, 1 cup of olive oil, and now I'm going to add my herbs. I'm putting 1 tablespoon of ginger root powder. Oh, yeah, that's a bit of a heaping tablespoon here, so let's go ahead and put some back in my jar. Next will be the turmeric. And if anybody who's worked with turmeric before knows, there it goes on my countertop. And now will be my fingers. It will stain whatever it touches orange. It'll come off eventually, quicker than a permanent marker, but it will stain. Now, for the tricky part, I am out of cayenne pepper. I was on a home remedy and pill capsule making spree. We had a little bit of rain over the weekend trying to play catch up, and I've been using a lot in some water for our livestock. So I do not have cayenne, but I have black. Cayenne is on our shopping list. I cannot believe I've gone through our stockpile, and there's probably some in the backup. In my husband's butcher shop, if I looked at the inventory list and went and dug into the do not touch until case of emergency things, I didn't want to do that. Black pepper works well, not as well as cayenne pepper. It won't get to the same degree of heat, but it will still soothe the inflamed muscles and help reduce pain. So now I have it all in here together. I'm just going to give it a good nice shake around. Then I will use my spoon, actually the end of my spoon, to make it fit my mason jar, and stir it. Makes a very nice, unappetizing looking mess, if you can kind of see in the jar here. It just looks like a bit of muddy, dirty water. And I'm going to steep this outside all day in the sun until I'm ready for it tomorrow to mix in with the beeswax and make a nice thick salve. We'll now go ahead and finish making our ginger and pepper warming salve. I have a 1/4 of a cup of my beeswax. I'm going to put right here in my cook pot. Scrape them all out. Now you want to warm these over a low heat, not even a low medium heat, as low as a heat as you can possibly get to prevent them from scorching. If they scorch and they don't melt quickly and evenly, then they are not going to mix in with your infused herbs well enough to form a nice solid that you want. Scooch this just a little bit closer. Now I'm going to go ahead and pour in my herbs that sit out in the sun yesterday. There's really not much of a difference in what you saw before and what you see now. It's a little bit lighter, and that's about it. Really, you're supposed to strain this through cheesecloth, coffee filter, piece of clean cotton scrap. I a lot of times will do that. But it must have been where I used a powdered form of the herbs, and they were very fine, and the sun was so intense. I really don't have any large pieces that I'm worried about ruining my salve here and making big chunks, which is why that you strain it. You want to get the liquid out not have any big chunky pieces. So I'm going to skip the straining step. Sometimes I do that, but not always. It depends on how my mixture ends up looking. I'm going to go ahead and scrape off the bottom of the jar here. Pepper kind of stuck to it a little bit. It was the heaviest weight of the ingredients. And then I'm just going to stir continually while it's on low heat. This shouldn't really take more than several minutes for the beeswax to melt. If you think, I'm using the little pastilles, I'm not even sure how you pronounce that, that's how I say it. They do melt much more quickly than if you're using, you know, a piece of beeswax off of a block that you've cut off, or even like the little round pieces you can get that look more like a wax melt. These are thinner, so they'll melt more quickly and evenly, which is ideal. If you think that it's taking way too long and you have your heat adjusted too low, adjust it up a little bit, but do so in small increments, again, to avoid scorching. Okay, prepare for dizziness. I'm going to scoot you a little more. I had this just a little too far back from the heat. Get a good idea what the pot looks like here. Nothing very exciting. I'm just going to be stirring until it all melts together. Beeswax are taking a little longer to melt than what I would have thought. I prefer to always go on the lowest heat possible, especially when dealing with cast iron. It takes a little bit longer for the cast iron to heat than some thinner pans. But once it heats, it holds the heat for quite a while. I could leave something sit on the stove after I made it with cast iron, and it would probably stay as hot as it was when I took it out for about a half an hour. Now, if you can notice, I'll stop stirring for a minute. The beeswax is starting to melt. It looks a little bit like a syrup, like maybe you're making caramel. That shade, but it's not thick. It won't get thick until it cools. And once you remove it from the heat, it may take 15 minutes, may take an hour. It depends on how hot you got it. Also, I get a little bit of foam here, if you can see that on the side. Sorry to make y'all dizzy. I'm going to turn it down a little bit. See a little bit of foamy look there. Means I'm in danger of getting it too hot. So I'm going to turn the heat back down. But everything is thoroughly melted. There's no chunks of beeswax left. So I'm going to get my oven mitts. And I think I'm going to use a coffee cup instead of trying to get a funnel and balance this heavy cast iron on my own. I usually have my husband or daughter here to help. I think I will get a coffee cup out of the cabinet and kind of dip in it out of this and into, okay, my container. So I have a little plastic container here to store it, to use as a salve. Similar to what you'd be doing when you're canning, how you dip out your stuff from your pot into your mason jars. And it is very, very hot to hold. So I'm going to go ahead and put this down. I do not want to spill it. And scoot my cast iron pot back a little bit because I'm turning my heat off now. If it's going to take you a couple of minutes or even just a minute to get it all dipped out, you do not want to go to all this bother and use up all these herbs and your beeswax merely to scorch it at the very end and have it be wasted. Alright, maybe I'm going to try to pour this after all. This is taking way too long to show you guys what the end looks like. It's kind of a neat yellowish shade, really mostly due to the ginger and to the color of beeswax. They come in all different colors. There we go. Now there's enough out that I can pour. Ah, and perfect. It's going to come near the top of my container. Using cast iron, you definitely want to clean this out quickly. You will have a big old mess to scrape out with your chainmail when that beeswax residue hardens. I'm going to let this sit here until it dries, or hardens and cools rather. I'm going to leave the top off because I'm using plastic this time instead of glass. And I'm going to let it cool. You're putting my hand on it. Probably feels like if you stuck your hand next to your crock pot after it's been on for a while. It's fairly hot. I don't want to seal the lid on it quite yet. And it'll create steam and condensation inside and can make it end up being gooey and take longer to cool. So I'm going to let it sit this way for probably 15-20 minutes before I put the lid on it and let it finish cooling. And then all you need to do is keep it in a cool, dry place, and it should keep for quite a while. I'd say months to years. But that's not what the directions say when I first learned how to do this. It said several weeks, but if you store it in a cool, dry place, it should keep for a very long time until the ingredients start to get hot or moldy, depending on how often it's been exposed to air. And once it cools, I'll put this little lid on it. And when I'm ready to use it, just put my hand in there and move it around like you would any other salve, kind of like the copper tone you may have used as a child when you went to the beach. And put it on the back, the arm, the leg, whatever part of the body has sore muscles, and just massage it in. It wouldn't look a lot different than this if you omitted the beeswax. It wouldn't have the color of the beeswax infusing on it all. Some of that's the turmeric. And the ginger, of all things, kind of have a yellowish or orange cast to it here. If you did it without the beeswax, it might take a little bit longer to cool. You might want to use it a little bit warm before it's completely cooled. But how hot it feels to your hand, definitely think about the fact that as you rub it in, especially if you're using cayenne pepper instead of black, however hot it is to your hand, it's going to feel a lot hotter on the body as it starts soaking in and you massage it. It would just be more liquidy. You'd probably pour it into a mason jar instead of something like this because it doesn't need to gel like a salve. And it should keep, again, months or longer if you're using if you're going with an oil instead of a salve.